G'day, punters. Welcome back to the Exotic Punters podcast. Very special guest on the podcast today. We're joined by Zac Purton. Zac, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be on, Angus.
No worries. Nice little treble on the weekend for yourself after a bit of a freshen up in Europe.
Yeah, I've come back bouncing, haven't I? So it was good to have a few horses finally turn up. It's been a little bit of a grind this season, but hopefully the second half of the season is going to be a bit stronger than the first half.
Oh, very nice. Well, let's go back to the very start of your time in racing. You were born in Lismore, New South Wales, but how exactly did you get into racing?
So my whole life I was always very good at sport. It didn't matter if I played soccer, cricket, tennis, little athletics, anything I did, I was always quite naturally talented. And as for as long as I can remember, I always loved horses. My parents unfortunately couldn't afford for us to have any. And anytime I had a friend that had a horse, all I would want to do was go to their house and ride their horse and hang around with the horse. So I had a love and an affinity for the animal. When I was 14 and a half, there was a jockey seminar on in Kempsey, which was an hour and a half away from Coffs Harbour, where we were living at the time. And it meant I could have the day off school. So I jumped at that opportunity. And I went down there and I was the smallest and lightest kid. And they asked me if I'd be interested, and that's why I was there. So they put me with a trainer at Coffs Harbour called Trevor Hardy. And at the age of 14 and a half, like I said, I walked in weighing 27 kilos. I was tiny. So I was athletic, I was small, I loved horses. So it was an easy fit, really.
Yeah, so following your apprenticeship in Coffs Harbour, you went on to win the Brisbane Jockey Premiership as an apprentice, which is an incredible effort. Were you surprised by how quickly you found success when you entered the ranks?
Well, to be honest, I thought I was just going to be good at everything I did because everything I had done I was good at. So it was no surprise to me that I was successful as a jockey right from the beginning. In my first 12 months of riding, I rode 145 winners, and at that time there was only three jockeys I think in Australia rode over 100 winners for the season. So of course, I was based in the country areas and riding the northern rivers of New South Wales, all the way out to Tamworth and Armidale, and then southeast Queensland, all the way up to the Sunshine Coast. So I was covering a lot of ground, but just went to the races nearly every day, rode as much as I could, and had a lot of success early. So the beginning felt like it was pretty easy. I've had a couple of quiet patches since then, which brought me back to reality a little bit. Um, but that's the story of every sportsman's life, really. It ebbs and flows, but and you go through different stages. You conquer the easier circuit, and then you take it up a notch, and you got to go up a notch and up a notch again. So you continue to test yourself and progress to the bigger leagues on the way through.
Yeah, so after your time in Brisbane, you spent a few years in Sydney, which is arguably one of the more competitive jockey rooms in the world, and you'd been really competitive there. But in 2007, you decided to move to Hong Kong. What was the reasoning for the move to Hong Kong?
So when I started riding, there was a jockey called Corey Brown. I didn't know who he was, but he was riding in Sydney. He was one of the best jockeys in Australia. I loved his seat on a horse, the way he rode, his style, and I used to study him right from the first time I began riding. And I always wanted to go and ride in Sydney because that's where he was. Um, but the opportunities come in Brisbane at the time because that's where, sorry, my boss was taking his horses. So I started riding in Brisbane. But Corey then went to Hong Kong, and I used to sit up on a Sunday and watch him ride in Hong Kong, and that's when my interest for Hong Kong racing first started to develop and grow. But it's a big step going from Brisbane to Hong Kong, and I'd had a lot of offers to go to Sydney, but at the time I just felt like I wasn't ready for it. But then when I started to think a little bit more about Hong Kong, I thought, okay, I've got to go and test myself in Sydney, see how I can perform there. And if things go well, then the next natural step after that would be to go to Hong Kong. So I went to Sydney for those 2 years. I finished second on the premiership there both years, without the backing of any major stables. Really, I was freelancing and spreading myself around. But I'd already always seen that every jockey that had gone to Hong Kong from Australia had then gone back to Australia and been a much better jockey. They were sharper, tactically more brilliant, and were able to dominate the racing in Australia. So I felt like I was finally ready to go to Hong Kong, and my initial contract was only for 6 months. I thought I would come over here for 6 months, improve myself, and then go back and try and dominate the racing in Australia. But I got here, and all those things were difficult when I first arrived because there were a lot of jockeys that had been here 10 or 15 years. They were well established. They had the good connections with the owners and trainers. They knew the system. They knew how the place run. They got all the opportunities, and here I was as a young kid arriving that no one really knew. And why are they going to give me an opportunity over someone that they already have a relationship with? So it was really hard to get going in that first season. But for whatever reason, I liked the lifestyle, loved the racing, and felt like I was young enough to stick around for a little bit longer and see how I could go. And fortunately, I did, because it's worked out well.
So, how were you able to adjust to the, I guess, the lifestyle and the racing in Hong Kong? And I guess, how long did it take you to feel like you'd established yourself in that jurisdiction? And also, could you explain the main differences, I guess, between the racing in Hong Kong and Sydney?
Well, I've been here 16 and a half years. I've won 6 championships. I've won the most Group 1 races of any jockey in Hong Kong. I've rode the most winners in a season, won the most prize money. I've basically done everything you can do here in Hong Kong, and I still don't feel like I've made it. It's a type of place that you'll never feel like you've made it. You've got to go out every race, every meeting, every week, and continue to deliver at that high standard, because they're ruthless here. If you start to slip one little bit, you're out the door. So you've got to remain motivated, you've got to remain focused, and you've got to remain disciplined. It's just as simple as that. But what was the second question again?
What were the main differences between racing in Hong Kong and in Sydney?
So in Australia, I find the races are run more gentlemanly like. They seem to jump out of the gates. They're not really in a big hurry to get a position. They fall into a position. They stay in their position until the 400-metre mark, and then they work out where they're going to go. Our races here are run at a faster tempo. It's more competitive. They get in a position a lot quicker. Things happen in a race. There might be someone taking off. The tempo might be changing. Jockeys might be trying to shift out away from the fence instead of staying where they are. So there's always something happening in the races here in Hong Kong. You can't just get your spot, switch off, and then turn up with 400 metres to go. You've got to continue to be aware of what's happening throughout the running of the whole race. And I think because of that, it's just a lot more competitive. And every jockey that I've spoken to has said that if they ride a winner in Hong Kong, they feel like they can ride a winner anywhere in the world.
So, two of your major rivals in Hong Kong have been Douglas White and Joe Moreira. Could you describe the key attributes to what made them so successful, and also how did those two contribute to your success?
So Douglas White, from what I understand, was the first jockey to really be aggressive in chasing rides. So he would come home after the race meetings, study all the races. He'd get on the phone, he'd ring the trainers, ring the owners. Um, he was like a vulture, right? Just looking for every little bit of meat he could get. And because he was as hungry as he was and operated the business the way he did, the other guys were getting home after the races, getting on the drink, watching TV, having a night out. They weren't really on the ball. So he changed the landscape of the racing here, and now all the jockeys have to operate in the way that he did, because he's set that platform. So that's sort of the advantage that he had, that it maybe business savvy, you could say. He brought a business sense to being a jockey, whereas Moreira was just so naturally gifted and talented. I've never seen a jockey in my life be able to do things on horses that he was able to do. And when he was confident, when his confidence was up, he was a phenomenal rider. A very positive rider, very aggressive. And I think because he just rode a stack of winners and was naturally gifted at doing it, then the opportunities just came his way.
So since you've moved over to Hong Kong, you've still been able to pick up some major Group 1s in Australia, including the Caulfield Cup back in 2014 on Admire Rugby. Could you describe how you picked up that ride and what that victory has meant to you?
Yeah, so the Caulfield Cup's one of the 4 major races in Australia. It's an important race. I don't get many opportunities to ride in those races back home, being based here, and especially not on a horse with a very strong chance. But I picked up the ride on him because at the time, during our off season, I was going to Japan to ride for a little bit. We at that time we had 9 weeks off during the off season, so I could go and ride there for a month. Enjoy another culture, learn more about the racing, build some relationships, and the Japanese horses were really starting to emerge on the world stage. Obviously, everyone is well aware of what they're capable of now, and every jockey seems to want to go there because when they travel, you want to be on their horses. So I just had that opportunity at the time where I was able to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not really able to do that as much now because our off season we only sort of get 5 weeks off now. So if I go and ride there for a month, I don't really get to have a holiday. And our season is so long, and we put our bodies through so much that I feel like, especially with my young kids now, it's better for me to have a holiday, let my body have a break, spend some more time with the family, and travel the world. So unfortunately, I'm not able to go there and commit the amount of time that I was back then, and that probably tells a bit of a story in the rides I've been getting out of Japan the last few years. I sort of don't get first call up or not really on the radar as much as I used to be with them because I'm not making the effort to go there, and that's fair enough.
Yeah. So you played a big part in the Sydney Autumn Carnival last year with 3 Group 1 wins, and then you also rode down in the Everest and the Melbourne Cup back in the spring. So will we see you at all in Australia in the major carnivals this year?
Well, I hope so. It just depends what opportunities come my way. There are some fantastic jockeys in Australia, and unfortunately, they have the connections down there with those owners and trainers. They're there riding track work trials, races week in, week out, and when the good horses come along, they want to be on them. So it's really difficult for that opportunity to present for me to get on a decent ride in those races. But I'm certainly only ever a phone call away, and it's an easy flight from here to Australia to compete in those races. So I'm always open to it, but I just have to basically be in the right spot at the right time.
So obviously you only race twice in Hong Kong a week, but there's obviously a lot of work you do in preparation for a race meeting, such as the form, the track work, and all the trials. So in that aspect, what does a week look like for you over there?
So our weeks are really structured, which I find suits me because I know what I've got coming up the next sort of 2-3 weeks. I ride track work 6 days a week, so Monday to Saturday. I take Sunday morning off because we race Sunday afternoon. So we race Wednesday night, Sunday afternoon. We have barrier trials Tuesday, Friday, and now that Trong Fa is up and running and the COVID restrictions have disappeared, we can go back up there. So every 2 or 3 weeks, they have trials up there, and that's about a 3.5 hour drive away. So a lot of the guys go up there for the trials as well. So we're on a horse every day of the week for 10 months of the year, basically. So it's a lot. We don't really get a break, and unless we get suspended or injured, and we don't want either of those. So outside of that, I have my personal training, which I do. Try and go running, ride the bike, do a bit of swimming, play some golf, tennis, do some mobility classes, yoga, Pilates. We've got the physio. Do all those little things. I have to do form. So we're always watching the races, the barrier trials, doing form for the races coming up. Then the last little bit, I got to sweat in the bath, right? So that takes a little bit of time to get the weight off, to get down to the weight I need to ride each race day. So we have all of that, as well as the socialising aspect of it as well. The owners here in Hong Kong are very much involved in their horses and the racing here, so they like to catch up for lunch, coffee, dinner. So that's dinner might be 2 or 3 nights a week with those owners. So when you package it all up, there are a lot of hours that go into just turning up on race day.
Zach, how much time do you think you'd spend doing the form for each week, just for an average meeting?
Yeah, so there's no such thing as an average meeting here in Hong Kong. Every meeting is like a Melbourne Cup meeting, really, and every race is very important. So it's important to put as much time and effort into it as I can. But in saying that, it's fairly easy to read because we only have 1,200 horses here. They race sort of every 2 to 3 weeks, and we get to know the horses very well. So it depends how big the field is, what barrier I've drawn, what position the horse races in the field, all those types of things. So if I'm on a horse that likes to race forward or handy, and just for instance, say I've drawn barrier 6, it's very important that I know what the horses in barriers 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 are going to do, because once I can work out where they're likely to settle, I can then work out how many of those horses I might be able to get in front of, or if they've got more speed than me, I've got to let them go and come in behind them. And then the horses drawn outside me are not as relevant because they'll fall into whatever position they are, but I still need to know. Say if it's going to be a fast run race, there might be 4 or 5 horses going forward, or if there's not much speed in the race, there might only be one horse going forward. So I can adjust my tactics accordingly, and then you've got to take into account the track bias, the rail position, and then I might adjust those things during the day as well.
Yeah, you had an incredible season last season, which we'll touch on shortly. But I want to bring up the season prior, the 2021-22 season. We had quite a bad fall in the, I think it was the Hong Kong Sprint in the December 2021. Then you went on to beat Joe Moreira in the Premiership that season. How were you able to come back from such a bad fall and I guess pick off right where you left off? Could you describe some of the challenges that you faced with that, both mentally and physically?
So it was really difficult at that time because we were under the COVID restrictions and we weren't allowed to go out and get any, say, proper treatment. So as I was recovering, I wasn't able to go to the physio. I wasn't able to go um, to, say, cryotherapy or get massages or anything like that. And I pushed myself to come back earlier than I should. But I had the goal of trying to win that premiership because when I fell, I was 18 winners in front of Joe. And when I come back, I think I was 15 or 16 winners behind him. So I felt like I'd been robbed. At that time, I'd ridden the fastest 50 winners in Hong Kong history, so I started really well. And that's why I had that break on him. And then I was just really disappointed that I felt like it had been taken away from me. But I was determined to come back as quick as I could and hopefully try to get that momentum going again, and just see if I could get back in touch with him. And fortunately for me, I come back and I started riding winners immediately. And although my fractures hadn't healed and I had a problem with my hip flexor, I couldn't walk properly and my shoulder and my neck was playing up. I just had the determination to try and push through. And there are a lot of times in that season where I felt like giving up. I felt like I just couldn't go to the races and ride anymore. It was horrible. At one stage, I said to the club, if you don't allow me to go and get treated, then I just can't ride anymore. So they then looked at the way that they were doing things, and they decided to hire a physio full time and hire a masseuse and make the machines that you need, whether it's ultrasound or shockwave, all those electro stimulation, magnetic, whatever it is. They made those things available, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to continue on. So it come down to the last meeting of the season. Joe and I went to the races on level terms, and I ended up riding 4 winners. He didn't ride any, so it was a nice way to finish the season off. I felt like I deserved it after everything I'd been through, not just with the fall, but the pain. And mentally it was very draining. It was challenging. And Joe and I happened to be on the same flight that night. I was going to Dubai, and he was connecting through Dubai on his way to Brazil. And I remember sitting there looking at him in the lounge, and he was pale white. His eyes were red. He just looked like he was empty. And I remember looking at him, thinking I felt like this. I felt the same. So we both gave it everything. It took a few weeks into my holiday for me to start to feel like I had some energy again. I was very flat.
So we'll touch on, I suppose, that record-breaking season last year when you had 179 winners, which is about 20% of the races in Hong Kong, which is just absolutely crazy. So what were the key factors that contributed to that success, and were there any nerves as you started to get closer to the record?
So Joe come back at the start of that season, and he only rode for 2 or 3 meetings, and then he decided to pull the pin and go back to Brazil. And I once again rode the fastest 50 winners in Hong Kong history, so I started really well. And I thought, okay, Joe's not here. I rode 138 winners the season before when I had the fall, and I missed a portion of the season. And I felt like if I hadn't have missed that portion of the season with the support aid from the stables, and I sort of went through the stables, and I sort of looked at the strength of their numbers and the quality of the horses, and I thought, okay, I've started well, I'm riding well. I can see there's some depth in the stables I'm riding for. I really wouldn't have been too far off the record the season before. Moreira's not here now. I felt like there was an opportunity there to try and push for it. So I stupidly said I was going to, and that was the worst thing I could have done, because then that's all everyone asked me about all season, and it put me under a lot of pressure. And there were a couple of times during the season where the ball wasn't quite bouncing my way, and I thought, it's not going to happen. But I didn't feel nervous at any stage, because then I started to get a roll on again. And I felt like I was always ahead of the run chase. I wasn't behind it. So I was in a comfortable enough position, although you're never guaranteed to ride any winners. And then in the end, the record was 170. I ended up riding 179, I think it was. So I got there fairly comfortably in the end. Um, and I was able to enjoy it those last few weeks.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, weight is a massive part of being a jockey, and I suppose you're generally riding about 54 kilos. So, what's the diet and exercise routine that you use to maintain that sort of weight, and what are the sacrifices you have to make to keep yourself in that condition?
So I went to a plant-based diet about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was fairly solid on that for about 3 years, and I felt really good. I felt amazing, and I just felt that it really helped my weight. I changed the way I was training a little bit, and I don't train the same every season all the time. I have niggling injuries that prevent me from training in a certain way, so I need to train in another way. Um, for instance, this season I've had a couple of problems, so I haven't been able to run as much as I would normally run. So I have to do a few other things. It's more about cardio, and fine tuning the like strengthening certain areas in my body with my muscles and balance and things like that. But I'm always evolving and adapting that aspect of it. But then I went away for a holiday one year, and we're people were sort of having a bit of a party, and there was a lot of food there, and I started picking um, at the things I probably shouldn't have been. And then I didn't fall off the plant-based diet wagon, but I would say I'm probably about 80 to 85% plant-based these days. When I go out for dinner with owners, of course, it's very hard to say I can't eat this and I can't eat that. So I just eat whatever is there, but I just control the portion size, and just eat smaller amounts of, whether it's steak, chicken, fish, pork, whatever it is. But certainly in the lead up to a race day, and when I'm at home, it's fruit and vegetables, beans, legumes, all those types of things, right? That you'd expect someone on a vegetarian plant-based diet to eat. And I find that when I certainly eat that way in the day before a race meeting, I feel like it flushes my body a little bit, and I do feel lighter and better. And I find these days when I eat heavier foods like steaks and chickens and things like that, it tends to feel like it's a rock within my body, and it seems like it sits in my body a bit more. So I do feel cleaner and better when I eat clean.
And obviously, you're towards the tail end of your career, but you're in touching distance of Douglas White's career race win record in Hong Kong. Are you motivated to continue to ride to try and, I suppose, break his record, or are you sort of just content with just calling it your career when you feels the best time to do it?
I'd say at the moment I feel pretty content just to call it at any stage. I'm just going along at the moment, seeing how things go and see where things take me. And, as long as we continue to enjoy living here and continue to get the support and continue to enjoy the racing here, then I'll just keep on for a little bit longer. Um, I'll make a call later in the season as to whether I'll come back again next season. But if I was to come back again next season, then that really is the season for me to break the record. So that would be my focus if that was the case. But we'll worry about that in a few months' time.
Zach, you made some comments about this time last year about how James McDonald should move to Hong Kong due to the financial benefits, and you copped a little bit of criticism for it. But we've since seen some Aussie jocks come over and have some success in Hong Kong, which I guess validated your comments. Do you think that more Australian jockeys should consider the move over, considering I guess you're also coming to the closer to the end of your career?
Yeah, so obviously Huey is here now, and he's not going home when he collects his pay at the end of every month. He's pretty happy with what he's getting. He's worked out. We only race 2 days a week here. He's got a good life outside of racing. He's getting paid well to do it. So um, he's very happy with the decision he's made, and James has obviously been doing very well in the small amount of time that he's been spending here, and he now can see the benefits of riding here full time as well. But he's got some things he wants to achieve in Australia before he makes that move, and that's good on him. He's when you come here like I did, you can be stuck here for a long time. So he's still got time on his side to do what he wants to do and finish his career here in Hong Kong. But yeah, for the other jockeys in Australia, of course, you're not guaranteed to be successful here. That's the scary part for them, right? Like they're very comfortable with the lifestyle they have at home, and they've worked hard to cement themselves into the positions they're in, and to give that away and come to an environment like Hong Kong where you're not guaranteed any support or guaranteed any success. The fear of failure can quite often scare people into remaining in the position they're in. But if they're ambitious and they want to have a go and they want to test themselves, even if they only want to come here for 3 months and just see what it's about, dip your toe in the water. You might like it, you might not, but if you don't try, you never know. But it's up to them really. They can make their own decisions.
Yeah, but as we were speaking about earlier, you were debating the move back to Sydney full time to ride, but obviously decided to stay in Hong Kong. Um, and with the talk about your retirement in recent months, I guess when it's all said and done and the curtains close on your career, what does retirement look like for Zac Purton?
Hopefully, it looks like playing a lot more golf, although my game is so up and down. It's very frustrating. But I do enjoy playing golf. I enjoy food as well. So it'd be nice to be able to eat and not feel guilty about eating. The lifestyle in Sydney, which is where we'll move back to, is a pretty good lifestyle. It'd be good to be able to go to a lot more live sport. I enjoy my sport. And I'd love to travel the world to all those big sporting events, whether it's, Augusta, Wimbledon, Super Bowl, Champions League finals, all those things that I'm not able to do because I'm contracted here and need to be here for the race meetings. So I would enjoy doing that. But what else am I going to do with my life? I haven't really thought about that at the moment. But getting my handicap down is going to be a main focus.
Love it. So to round off our podcast, we usually try and do a quick fire questions with our guests. So I'll start off. If you weren't a jockey, what do you think you'd be doing?
Geez, I've never thought about that. I've walked in the stable at such a young age. I just don't know. Yeah, it's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, fair enough. Number two, favorite racetrack you've ridden at?
I've got a few. I love riding Happy Valley on a Wednesday night under lights. It's an exciting track for me. I love Shah Tim because it's all business. We have our biggest races there, and I've had a lot of success there. I love Ramwick. So they're probably my three favourite tracks.
Your most memorable win?
Oh, there's been so many. If I had to narrow it down to just a few, winning on Aero Velocity in Japan was a massive thrill. Winning on Little Bridge at Royal Ascot was great. Admire Rugby in the Caulfield Cup. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed all the successes I had on Beauty Generation here in Hong Kong, especially when he was bashing them up the way he was, that Hong Kong mile, when he won by 3.5 lengths ease down. That was probably the best performance I've been a part of. And winning the Derby here in Hong Kong as well, our most prestigious race.
Looks like you might need to build a new cabinet with all those trophies behind you.
Yeah, I've got trophies in boxes and cupboards and cabinets everywhere, so it's a good problem to have.
Oh, absolutely. The best horse you've ever ridden?
I'd say Beauty Generation,
Yeah. If you could win any race, what would it be?
Melbourne Cup,
Favorite sport outside of racing?
golf.
Yeah, love it. Favorite golf course you've played?
Oh, there's one called Shanquin Bay in Hainan. Phenomenal course, great experience. Really enjoyed it. In Australia, can't beat New South Wales golf course.
Yeah, love it. Well, you say you're out at New South Wales golf course. What's your dream four ball out there?
Geez, I don't know actually. Tiger Woods would have to be there, right? Like he's the best player of our generation. Um, who else have we got? I don't know. We'll just keep it at him. I'd love to have a game with him.
Yeah. And finally, favorite all-time sportsman?
Oh, I'd say Tiger Woods because I love the game of golf and for everything that he's achieved and done for the game.
Yeah, love it. Zac, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. We really appreciate your time.
No worries, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.